Welcome to the show, Luke. Luke, you started your career managing a betting shop in Sheffield. You went on to run contact centers of up to 1,000 people for brands like Virgin Media and eBay, and now you're the CEO of a people development company, MadeYou Coaching, coaching leaders all across Europe and the world, of course. If you had to isolate one skill that's carried you through all of these different chapters, what would it be? And at what point did you realize that it was your edge?
One skill that's really hard to hone down. I think the one skill I've probably had throughout is being able to talk to people at an individual level. I think my management style very early on was adaptable to the individual. So rather than me just having one style, it was that chameleon approach. I think that's probably one skill that's been with me all throughout, and really guided my career. And I don't think I realized I had it until probably my third management job, where I had a team of 40 people and I was 22, I think, at the time. And I had a 65-year-old lady called Denise working for me who was fabulous. And everyone told me, you're not going to be able to manage Denise. There's too much of an age gap and she's too set in her ways. And Denise loved me. So I think that was the point in time when I realized, hang on a second, there's something different about the way I manage than the way people typically manage.
That's really interesting. At 22, you were managing 40 people, you said, in a call center.
Yeah, yeah.
Is
And
that straight out of uni?
no, that was straight after Ladbrokes, the betting shop. So I transitioned from betting shop manager into office, and I started in utility supply as a team leader, and then worked into a management role, which is the one we were talking about. So, yes.
Cool. And so being a chameleon, what does that really mean? Like you're just adapting the way that you lead per person that comes to you and you're trying to support?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure chameleon's the right word really, but that adaptive element is really important. Is I think being able to see somebody as a unique individual, but also understand what motivates them, what engages them, what demotivates them, what de-engages them, and then having the approach that works for that person rather than just a blanket approach.
Hmm. Interesting. So key approaches that work for different people. You've obviously trained thousands of people as well and helps them make that journey themselves. What like approaches have you seen help them the most and like empower them? What approach do you take towards leadership training?
So I think for me and the rest of Made You as well, because it's definitely something that we stand by, is when we're doing any kind of leadership training, we want it to be immersive. We don't want people sat in a room falling asleep because somebody is telling them what they should be doing. We want them to experience what they should be doing. So I think the fundamental kind of penny drop moments in any of the training courses we do is when somebody's doing something, because we've got some really weird games in our training courses, like real fun games that you don't understand why you're doing it. Then afterwards we either say, this is what happens when you do what we're telling you to do, or this is what happens when you don't do what we're telling you to do. And that penny drop moment of them actually being in it and feeling it from a completely detached environment from work, and then thinking, that's literally right. Then that's what I should be doing, or that's what I should avoid doing. So them are kind of the moments where we really see a difference in how the leaders transform their mindset rather than just having the knowledge.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Something that's spoken about a lot is like, and I think your coaching obviously does this, is like teaching soft skills, but you also call them core skills. Like, what's the difference between those labels and what is a core skill?
So for me, I have a real problem. I'm laughing because I have a real problem with the word soft skills, because I think anyone who's went into management or leadership realizes that the people element, the leadership and the management of people is not a soft skill, it's a hard skill. And I think when we approach technical training and technical skills, we have such a formulaic approach and we understand that people need that skill set. And just by calling something soft skills almost devalues it, when actually it's just as valuable, especially in those leadership positions, as having the technical capabilities to do the job. And ultimately, it is the technical capabilities to do the job. So I call them core skills because I think without them, managers and leaders will never be effective. And I think those people promoted into those roles without those core skills really need to adapt them very quickly. And probably the easiest way to have exposure to it would be training workshops or these collaborative facilitative workshops that MadeYou does.
What are some of those core skills that like you see that people have that help them rise through, become a great leader, get into management? Because a lot of young people, that's their aspiration, right? They want to be a leader. It's spoken about a lot. So what are those?
I mean, the interesting one is just understanding how to talk to people. I think this communication aspect is very undervalued. So, giving feedback is a core fundamental. I think when you're managing or leading people, people need to know where they are, and people really want to know where they are. And a lot of the research is showing that the newer generations want feedback about how they can improve and what they're doing well, and they want it to be transparent. And I think a lot of managers shy away from having core conversations. You'll either have managers that are shy to give difficult feedback, constructive directional feedback, which I think isn't difficult if you position it in the right way, because it should be positioned as in this is how you can improve rather than this is what you're doing wrong. And if it's positioned that way, it really lands. And ironically, a lot of managers who are used to giving negative or constructive feedback are less appetite around giving positive feedback, and people need to know what they need to maintain doing because they're doing so. I think feedback is a fundamental one, and then if you can adopt that feedback approach of managing and leading others to your peer group and your superiors, which is also like, how do I talk to these people, how do I give them feedback, how do I engage with them? So that kind of listening, communication, I think those are fundamentally the core parts of it. And if you think about any one of those core skills we're talking about, like negotiation skills at leadership level, is that's just about how you're communicating and listening to somebody else. Presentation skills is how you're communicating to a group of people. So it's all about that adaptive approach rather than the one size fits all approach. And having a real good understanding of individuals. Some people are very energetic and very high personalities and big personalities. Other people are reflective and focused and analytical. So it's like, how can I be adaptive as a leader to these different personalities on my team?
Yeah, I think that's missing so much in a lot of leaders that like I've had in my life is like they're not very adaptive. They succeeded because they went down a certain pathway and they think that everyone else should also have that skill that helps them win. But like if you're a quiet person and they're a super confident person, that's really difficult. So like if I am a young person that's getting that feedback from a manager that I need to be more like them, like what do I do about it?
Oh, that's a difficult question, George. Uh, I would kind of, I mean, I've got two approaches. I think from a political correctness point of view, I would probably challenge the manager to ask for more specific feedback, like rather than just be like, you, what specifically do you need from me and why? Because I think ultimately is a lot of leaders and managers see the problem and then see the solution that they would have and then present the solution as feedback, whereas actually we should be presenting the problem or the thing we need to overcome and the proposed, like, what it would look like as success rather than the solution, because I think the individual can draw with the what needs to improve, what would the eventual outcome look like. They can find their own solution in that. So I think if we could push back and kind of get more feedback on what am I missing and what does success look like, then they can go away and figure out, right, so me as Luke, how would I come up with the solution rather than just being them, because I can't be them because I'm not. How would I make the gap between those two things? But I would also challenge as well. I think there's some parts of I've seen, just using the example of quiet, reflective, analytical people be amazing managers in the future. Whereas in certain situations with more confident managers, they've been told they'll never be a manager because they don't have that depth of personality, they don't have that kind of confidence, and they're getting that feedback all the time. And yet, actually, they've made amazing managers, and went on to leadership just because they've started to be aware of how did they make these things work given who they are. So I think that there needs to be, for the individual, there's some room to develop and grow and change the way you're approaching things, but there also needs to be some awareness of who am I as a unique individual, because that's part of who I am. So how do I make that a better version of myself rather than trying to be something I'm not? But I think, yeah, in that situation that you've asked me about, if they could question a little bit more, I think they would get more valuable feedback.
Obviously, part of the reason young people are brought into companies is so that They can challenge the way things are traditionally done, for instance. They can bring new innovative ideas and feedback. And a lot of that is built in giving great feedback to maybe your seniors or just to other people in general. How do you teach giving feedback? Like, what makes good feedback?
So, I mean, we've touched on it a little bit in one of my answers, which is the best. I think the best way to give good feedback is to talk about mentally place it in a way that it's meant to be. Feedback is about how do we look good in the future. That's ultimately why anyone would be giving any feedback in a business environment and potentially also in a personal environment. But we're not giving feedback to criticize what's already happened or critique what's already going on at the moment, because that's current. That's happened. There's nothing we can do about it. The reason we give feedback is to improve things moving forward. So I think if somebody is coming into a business and challenging things, rightfully so, because status quo is the downfall of many businesses anyway. So I think status quo always has to be challenged because there's always a better way or a new approach or optimization. So these things need to be challenged, but it should be positioned in a how can it be better moving forward rather than what's going wrong, as in this isn't working or this doesn't work or this could be done better. Actually stop talking about feedback in that way. Give it in a much way directional way of this could be better in the future if we do. It's exactly the same content. It's just how we positioned it is a lot more engaging for the person hearing it because it sounds less than a critique and much more like an optimization opportunity.
So when giving it, just focus on how things can be better in the future. What's that little tweak that can be made that's going to help them, just like that incremental thing, and
Yeah,
maybe shy away a little bit from the negatives to start with, unless the connection is there.
yeah, very much so. I think, it's negatives are really interesting because we call it future pacing feedback, where we're pacing pacing in the future and presenting in the future. And you can still talk about the negative, but you turn it into what would be positive in the future. So if we could optimize this and if we could streamline this and if the systems were better connected, this is what it would look like. You're still giving the critique because you're almost assuming that those things aren't happening, but it's positioned in a future paced way. Typically, somebody who's open to that feedback, because you've already got in their head because you use future pacing, then they will ask questions like, what do you mean? Can you explain a little bit more? And that is when you've got the opening to give much more constructive, critical feedback on what's not working, I think. But in order to get the open ears, position it in future pace first.
The other thing you mentioned was just the importance of communication and communicating effectively. Obviously, you've trained a lot of people doing call support and things like that to effectively have conversations, meet people for the first time, strangers, and have like a well thought out, well paced conversation. What are some of the biggest mistakes you've seen when training people that like the common person might not notice that you spotted and helped people work through?
I think in communication, I think in any kind of communication, but even in the examples that you've given, I think fundamentally it is a lot of people talk about themselves a lot. And that might be through a feeling of confidence, as in they position themselves because they're overconfident, or it can come from the complete opposite, where they're not confident and they're feeling a little bit insecure, so they're trying to fill the space. And I think here, when you talk about yourself a lot, you devalue the communication. There's a break out there. And I think if you can show more interest in the other person, asking questions and getting them to talk more about themselves, that's when you get some really good communication going on.
Sorry, Luke, you were like chopping in and out. um, we'll cut this part out, but oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, yes.
Okay, it's just
You can hear
cutting a
me still or
second.
not?
Let's see if it. Yeah, it's coming back, I think now. Um, you were saying, could you circle me back around as like the final parts you said, summarize it?
I think if when we think about effective communication, I think if we can stop focusing on talking about ourselves as much and start asking the other person to talk about themselves and ask questions and get them to share more about who they are and what their motivations are, I think that's when we get much more effective communication. And that actually improves negotiations, it improves peer-to-peer collaboration, it just improves the general communication aspect. I think a lot of people talk about themselves too much, which is ironic on this podcast, but I think that's that's probably the key thing for effective communication.
I think I got you back. It's just
Good.
a little bit choppy. I'll go with the next question.
I've
um,
just changed on my
maybe.
network as well, so it should be better.
Cool. Okay, let's see. It's all good. Um, okay, asking people more questions. Like I've always been taught that's very important. Sometimes, and I think this is the case for a lot of young people, they can be in a conversation and not know what to ask next, or not know where to go next, or not know how to steer it. Are there any like frameworks or techniques that you've helped people understand that help them get better at that exercise of asking more questions?
I think it's a hard one to do. There are some techniques on this one, I think, but the general consensus is really listening to what the individual is saying. And I mean, it's easier in person, but really picking up on where somebody almost gets a little bit more excited. Because if somebody's sharing something, if I'm talking about a holiday I've been on and I'm talking about the holiday, and then suddenly I go, I saw this thing, and you can see my dynamics change, then it's very easy to say, oh, you want, tell me more about that because that sounds really interesting. It might not be interesting to you, but you already know that it's interesting to the person. So I think them are the kind of techniques of picking up when there's a verbal cue that somebody's a little bit more, the tonality's changed or the excitement's changed, and asking more about that. And if all else fails, I always say, just say it, tell me more about that. It's the easiest thing to do, and it's the easiest filler when you've got nothing else to ask. Is just say, "Tell me more about that," and then the individual will start talking again. And I think that's probably the easiest way to get somebody else to keep talking is just ask them to say more.
Brilliant. I think it's a great question and an easy one to start implementing. Tell me more about yourself, or tell me more about that. And I think what's interesting about your story as well, Luke, is that by the sounds of it, early on you had um, quite a lot of like status, for instance, in the workplace. Like you were managing a lot of people, 65-year-old Diane, as you mentioned. What helped you get to that point early in your career? Like a lot of young people would look at that and think, oh, I want to be doing that at 22 as well. So how did you get there and what helped you do it?
So I would say that there is an element of seizing opportunities when they're given. So I think for me, certainly, I started work even at the betting shop. I was working part time through university, so it was only ever meant to be just extra cash, and I really enjoyed it. And then certain opportunities presented themselves. I was still part time. Do you want to be learning how to settle bets rather than just taking the cash? Yes. Can you look after the shop while the manager's out? Yes. So these are the opportunities of me just seizing opportunities that were presented and then just going with them, and also really working hard, and proving my worth when I was given those opportunities, um, and almost as well just I think something that helped my career but also hindered my career, because when I know I shouldn't be doing it, then it helps, and when I forget that I and just automatically do it, which is realizing that I don't know everything. I think has been when I realize I don't know everything, I'm much more open to everything else that's going on around me, and I learn so much more information. So some of it is wrong, and I can go, oh, no, that's not, but I'm open to it. The times when I've thought that I've known everything are the times where I've kind of halted my career a little bit and got a little bit stuck because I'm not learning anything new, and I'm still delivering, I'm still performing exceptionally well, but I'm not progressing. People are holding me in a position. So I think also the times when I've kind of been very, I want to say the word humble, and that's probably the best way to do it, as in I don't know everything, but give me knowledge. That's when the times when my career has accelerated. When it's slowed down a bit is when I've kind of got, I wouldn't say necessarily an ego, but more of a I know what I do, and I know I do it well, and I know what works and what doesn't work, and then I kind of come closed off, and that's what's kind of slowed my career path down a little bit at times.
That's a tough one though. Like there's been a lot of times already where I've thought, oh, like I'm pretty competent at this. Like I don't need to know anything else. And then, like you said, found myself in a similar rut of not being able to break through that or not being willing to accept feedback from other people. For a young person that enters the workforce for the first time, they often go from like being the top dog at university or maybe in their local bar job or whatever it is to then this new environment where they have to be willing to absorb feedback, which can be a little bit of a suck. How do they get better at like being more humble and letting their ego go? Like what's helped you through those times?
I think, I mean, talking from personal experience here, but I think you turn the ego against itself in the way that if I want to be the best that I can possibly be, then I have to be open to hearing everyone else's point of view and everyone else's feedback, because in all of that stuff, that 80% of it might be either stuff I already know or stuff I disagree with. There's going to be 20% that I didn't know and is really valuable, and that helps me grow. So it's like I think I'm great. That's great. I've always been the top, at university, and I'm coming in with all that kind of ego or confidence, like inner self confidence. In order to maintain that, I just need more information and more knowledge, and I'm going to get that from other people around me. And I think just being aware that if I listen to everyone and hear what they've got, I can dismiss 80%, but that 20% is worth listening to. I think that then helps me, because then tomorrow I know more than what I did today. And that makes me even more self-confident and even more, it boosts me up again. So it's like it almost is a tricking the ego to feed itself rather than let the ego take control. And just give it stuff, feed it with more information and more knowledge that helps you be more confident. So that's kind of what's worked for me is turning it inward.
Great. You obviously work as well now with a lot of CEOs and founders and senior leaders who have probably also got a little bit of that as well, where they don't always have that level of humbleness. And what I'm curious about though is sort of the other side of the stone, which is like, what are those traits that you see in all these different senior leaders that you work with that got them to the positions that they got in?
Well, this is a good question. It might be hard for me to describe. I think fundamentally people who grow in their career have a certain level of pace and drive about them, whether they are building their own company, whether they progressed in an organization and ended up in a leadership position, but there's definitely some drive and something about them which is pushing them. What I've noticed is in any role in a business is there is a cap point. I normally say it's like senior manager, junior leader point, where the the value of yourself, the ego manager, the person who's amazing at what they do and they know their stuff, that gets you to that point very well. But it stops you from getting any further, because as you progress in your career, your relationships with your peer group become more important. And if you think about a C level, for instance, is they are less their immediate team is the other C suite, not their direct reports. Their direct reports are basically carrying out what the strategic vision is, but the core meetings and every time you're in a room with people, it's always with that group of people. So peer relationships become much more important, and therefore how I speak to people without upsetting them, how I collaborate with people without kind of downgrading what I need and what I want, and all those dynamics, they become so much more important. So that kind of I almost want to do this. That kind of approach can get you so far in your career, but it almost then caps you if you can't adapt to being more open. And I think a lot of the times I see, and when you mentioned about ego, is if I'm seeing a lot of ego, I'm probably dealing with a senior manager or junior leader who is stuck in their role, and I'm being asked to coach them to step up. But I can see the reason they're not going to step up is because they need to work on that first before they'll be open to getting that collaborative approach, which will take them to the next level. And the leaders that keep progressing are the ones that understand almost how to play the game a little bit, and have those interesting collaborations, dynamics, communication techniques. There's loads of stuff that goes on in those leadership meetings that is just about getting the right thing for the business.
You mentioned as well, like they have a bit of a different pace to them almost, some of the senior leaders that you see excel. Like, what do you mean by that?
I think there's, I think I mentioned this in another podcast. I would never say that somebody who works like 7 o'clock in the morning till midnight every day is, that's not what I'm talking about with pace, because I think you can still have a pace and still have a good understanding of when and how to work. But it's almost like there's just something about them that's giving more. And I don't know whether, I'm not saying this right or wrong. I mean, for me, there's people who come in, clock in at 9 o'clock and go out at 5 o'clock, and I call them steady eddies. And I think they are the heart and soul of every business. Every business needs steady eddies, otherwise it will fail. Um, and there's nothing wrong with that. They've probably got more going on in their personal life than their work life, and therefore the balance is right. But then there's other people who are much more career or work minded, and their pace is just slightly different in regards to what they execute. They go above and beyond their job description. They're asking questions. They're almost inquisitive about everything else that's going on in the business. They're trying to see how everything connects and how they can add their own impact and show their own worth. And that's what I mean about the pace with these people who seem to progress, is they're adding the impact, but they're doing it in the right way. They're not doing it for self status. They're doing it to add value to the business, and therefore the status comes from the value they add rather than the look at me kind of people approach.
Brilliant, brilliant. I obviously, and a lot of young people want to impress their bosses as well. When we have a job, we want to impress our senior leaders and different stakeholders in the business. How do I get better at doing that? Like, is it about upping the pacing myself and spotting some of those gaps? Or like, what are some of the key things you do from knowing a lot of these senior leaders on this coaching and slightly deeper basis that would help them see that I'm adding value and want to contribute more to the business?
So the first thing is always do the job that you're paid to do. Because I think if you've got your hands all over the place and you've got this inquisitive approach, but the core job's not getting done, then you're not adding the value. So I think the first core point is for the leader to recognize the value you're delivering. You must deliver the value that's expected of you. After that, there's two approaches. You can spot opportunities and bring them to the leader. That's not a problem. I think that shows value as well. Anything that you can show initiative in within the parameters of the empowerment you've got in your job, I think that's also good. Helping other people out is also a good way to add value as well. And then also just asking the leader, what else can I take on board? What else could you give me? And asking for those opportunities. I think that also shows value. I think a lot of the times when I'm coaching senior leaders is they don't know how or who to give extra work to, and they almost think my team's at capacity, I don't want to overload them. Whereas if somebody's coming to them saying, I'm all right actually here, I could take on more, what could you give me? That's the opportunity for them to offload. And that gives even more value, because not only then are you offering value to the business, you're offering value specifically to the manager that, as you said, George, you're trying to impress. So
Yeah, brilliant. I think there's a lot of value that we've touched on in terms of like what to do early in your career, what leadership looks like, how you grow into a leader. I want to learn a little bit more about you, Luke, and sort of like how you've ended up where you are. And so my first thing I'm curious about, because a lot of young people want to start businesses and things like that, is when you look back at 22-year-old you, do you think that he would expect you to be here now, owning your own business?
definitely not. Definitely not. I was very career motivated. I come from a background where the work ethic in our family was very hard, so like hardcore. So I was expected to get into work and deliver even straight after university. I probably would never have expected to own my own business. Definitely at 22. And to be honest, there was times throughout my career, because my career is customer experience, customer support, payment, risk, fraud, and marketing as well. If anyone ever asked my passion, I think up until I was about 30, they used to say, are you passionate about what you're doing? And I was like, no, I'm really not. And then at some point in time, I was like, hang on a second, I do really enjoy it. So I think I was about 32 before I even admitted to myself that I enjoyed the job I was doing. And I was good at it, and I enjoyed it and being good at it. I think up until that point, I just knew I was good at it. But yeah, I would never have imagined the transition into managing my own business.
How did you figure out that you like were actually passionate about that thing in the end? Because I think it's a difficult thing. Like, what's my purpose? Where do I go? What do I do? Did you kind of like trip and fall into it, or was it something that you grew into or got good at and then lent more into it? I'm curious to know more.
Wow. Uh, I think my original experience in the corporate world before setting up MadeYou, I think I kind of tripped into it. As I said, I seized opportunities that were given and then followed the path. And then realized that the path I was following I was good at. As I said, it took me a while to realize I was passionate about it. But now I can spot passion. I mean, I'm passionate about what I do now. I enjoy what I do now. But it is almost you see these posts on social media. It's like, oh my God, it's Monday morning. You know, always been. It's those things where if you're not getting the Monday morning dread, then there's and almost the opposite. I get kind of a little bit of excitement, and I used to back then, and I get it now at MadeYou. Is if I'm kind of getting like, oh, I want to get back to work, kind of thing, and not in a sadistic way, but just in an excited way. Then I think that tells you that there's something going on from an emotional point of view that's driving you, other than just being good at something. So yes.
I think that's like beautiful. That like waking up with that desire of I want to get back to work because like I think it's a great almost like quick test you can do on yourself. It's like, am I waking up at the moment excited to get to work or not? And then I guess if not, there's some decisions that need to be made that might be a bit uncomfortable, or you need to reflect a little bit more. What should someone do if they do feel like the answer to that question is no in your eyes?
I mean, that's literally the point I was going to do is really understanding is if you're getting that kind of dread, is understanding what is the dread. Because, you might work with somebody that you don't particularly like. I might be having, and there might be a new director that's working with me in previous job, and I'm like, oh God, I can't deal with John, that's awful. So I'm getting the Monday morning dread. But I'm not getting the Monday morning dread about work, I'm getting the Monday morning dread about John. That's very specific. So to try and understand what is giving you the uncomfortable feeling about the job that you're in. Is it actually the job? Is it the level of empowerment you're being given? Is it the fact that you're being held back? Is it specific people? Is it the team? And understanding what is giving you the dread. What elements are you enjoying and what elements are you not enjoying? And it's like what's sucking your energy. And if you can pinpoint what's sucking your energy, I think that'll either give you the indication that it's time to move on, or do something about it if it's not that important, and also give you the energy if you are going to move on. What are you moving on to? Because if I'm moving away from John because I know John's never going to get, he's always going to be in that company, then I know that I still want to keep my job. I still want to keep my job title. I still want really good teammates. I just want a different manager as well, or a different peer to work with. But if there's fundamentally, I understand what's draining my energy, it helps me figure out what I need from the next job or the next opportunity. So trying to, as much as possible, to remove the negative and give more positive.
Great. I think there's a lot of young people who aren't sure about what's next and what to do. So I think that a little bit of actionable advice is really helpful for them. I have one more question, Luke, which I think is going to help us understand a little bit more about you and how the future for young people could look like in your eyes. Obviously, you spent a couple of decades now, it might be even be a few, helping people and organizations develop the skills that actually drive like real performance and real results and output. And so part of that is the education system, the way that young people learn. And when you reflect on your own experiences, if you could sort of change something about the way that young people are prepared for the world of work and geared up towards starting their first career, creating impact, what would it be?
Oh, I think preparing for the world. I mean, I'm talking many decades ago. But thinking about now, I think it's just about getting more of an understanding of what structure looks like in regards to an organization. I think it's very different than the educational system when you come out, which is almost, even at university, it's almost autocratic. You're told when to go here and when to go there and what you need to do, and it is very autocratic. And I think a lot of the businesses, certainly the way business is evolving, is less of that autocratic leadership style and much more of a expectation setting and some parameters about what we expect from you in your job, but less granular than what you would have in the education system. And it's almost being used to not just sitting there waiting for instructions, but getting involved in doing things. being open into listening, I think, is we've covered, and also being open to feedback. And if you're not getting the feedback, asking for it, because I think it's that not expecting people to tell you in the way that they would tell you at university, for instance, of, this isn't working or this is your mark or anything like that. I think sometimes in businesses managers don't do that. They should, but they don't. But ask for it if you need it. I think that would also help people get prepared for work. And I think it's probably happening all over. But the more exposure you can get to any kind of job, I think gives you that focus of different styles of managers, the managers you like, the managers you don't like, the different styles that they use. I think any kind of job, whether it's a part-time job or a summer job or anything you're doing, even if you're going away to different destinations and working abroad over the summer, I think these are opportunities where you get used to what works for you rather than what to expect moving forward. And then I think when you join an organization, you've got a good awareness of how does somebody in this job get the best out of me, because I already know what works for me and what doesn't. And that then helps you guide either the manager through feedback or the HR team through the recruitment process, or it helps you guide which company works best and saves time on spending 2 years at an organization that's never going to be right for you. So I think the more exposure you can get to any element of management, across your while you're at university, I think that gives you a good understanding more of yourself and how managers will get the best out of you, what you like, what you don't like.
Luke, I think there's been so much value and snippets and gems in here for young people to take away. I want to throw it back to you one last time for like a final takeaway thought. We'll call it a bonus question. If there's there's obviously a lot of young people out there that aren't sure about what's next to do. Is there something that we might not have covered here that you wish you could tell 21-year-old you leaving university that would have made a big difference? Like, what would that be?
I'm not going to answer the question of what would I tell 21-year-old Luke that would be valuable today kind of thing. I think more of something that I kind of learned very quickly in my career, and I wish I'd learned when I was at university, which was, if there's something I'm enjoying, so I don't necessarily know what I want to do in my career, but I know there's things that I enjoy doing. And if there's a gap in the market and it's aligned, even though I can't see how directly it's aligned, but it's kind of aligned with what I like, then for me, I wish I'd known earlier that because I could have set up MadeYou in the UK 20 odd years ago, and it probably would have been a lot more profitable than what it is now. It's a good company, but there was so much more of a gap in the market back then. And I just think I missed an opportunity of something I enjoy, and there's a gap in the market. What can I do about it? And I also think if you're joining the workforce, is thinking about what you enjoy and why you enjoy it, and then thinking about how can you transform that into value for an organization. I think that also helps when you're sat in front of somebody and they're interviewing you. It's about having something that's unique, and what's unique is what can you do for them, rather than just ticking the box on the job description. It's like, you are a person. For me, I'm a personality. There's something about me which is uniquely different than you, George. So if I'm sat in front of somebody, if I'm saying I can do this, I can do this, I can do that, that's no different than what you would say in the same interview. But what I would bring to the role is very different than what you would bring from the role. And I also wish that I would probably tell my 21-year-old self is, understand what you are at this current level, even though you're only 21. What are you bringing with your personality, your behaviors, your attitudes, not just what you clinically can do in ticking boxes. So I think ultimately there's two paths there. If you're thinking about being a founder, find something you enjoy, see if there's a gap, and then figure out how to align those gaps. And if you're joining a workforce, is understand what would make you different than anyone else applying for the same job, and it is who you are. So what are you bringing about who you are that would be different?
Luke, it's been a pleasure to have you on. You've been tremendously helpful in the work that I'm doing, and also I think this episode will be really helpful for some young people out there listening. If people want to just learn some more about you or MadeYou, where's best to go?
Probably MadeYou.eu, or just look me up on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Luke Todd based in Malta, so in fact I think I might only be the Luke Todd based in the UK as well. But yeah, I'm easy to look up on LinkedIn, or just go to MadeYou.eu and they'll find me there.
Brilliant. Luke, thanks a lot for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, George. Cheers.